So the insight that I have chosen to communicate here is what I see as a new mega trend in ophthalmology, and it is the accessibility, a whole new kind of accessibility of fundus imaging and fundus examination. And it is very strong in Denmark because the new technology of digital fundus imaging coupled with OCT and the portability of the image information has happened in a very interesting way, not through the public healthcare system, but because the optometrists have chosen to make fundus imaging available as either something you pay a nominal fee for or get absolutely for free, just as a way of attracting people to go in and visit an optometrist or optician, as they're usually in Denmark, who has the agenda of selling contact lenses or spectacles, and they're using a bait in the form of a so-called healthcare check, and this health checkup consists of a fundus imaging session, and they are imaging thousands of people every day, and obviously they're seeing a lot of healthy people who don't really need that, but we as ophthalmologists don't have the burden of seeing them because it's being taken care of outside the public healthcare system, completely on a free market base. And then we get a whole new kind of referrals. We're seeing patients who come in with very early signs of Stargardt's disease with absolutely no detectable or symptomatic functional deficit, but they have the lesions. We make the phenotype classification, and mostly we do a molecular genetic and diagnosis as well. So we are collecting patients and keeping them in our registries, available for clinical trials and all kinds of family workups as relevant. And I think it's a new beginning for retinal disease and an opportunity to address issues potentially as new therapies pop up at a stage where there is still a lot to salvage. It's a fundamental problem in retinal disease that people come in very late with advanced retinitis pigmentosa, for instance, before they are diagnosed with that very serious and disease, which is going to give them a disability. They may already have a serious one when they are being diagnosed. Obviously, this is a kind of screening that has not been organized from top down, and it's not systematic, but it's working. It's doing something that has never been done before. And why can it happen? Because people have access to walk-in service. You don't have to make an appointment. You can do it on a whim as you walk down the high street. You see yourself in front of the optometrist shops, and they'll be waiting for you, not like having to book an appointment in our public healthcare system, which can be quite a nuisance. So even if you have a manifest vision problem, you will often be told you can appoint an appointment in 1 year from now, which is a problem that we have been unable to solve, although we've been very aware of it for 50 years or more. And now there is a lot of variation between countries, but I think it's coming to every country. Optometrists and opticians have very different levels of authorization, high levels in the English-speaking countries, and as I've heard, France and Turkey, there's very little they can do. They cannot even write a spectacle prescription. But I think it's going to be harmonized through market competition in the long run. And finally, people have found out that the internet exists and that referrals can have a fundus image attached. It's taken an incredibly long time for the public healthcare system to find out, but it is getting better. And I think there's also a possibility for an opening here, namely in the form of electronic patient records in the sky that are patients' personal property so that they can easily move them around between providers. Something that our healthcare system doesn't offer, but I think it's going to be more democratically available in the future. So I think that this new megatrend of accessibility of fundus imaging, quasi-universal accessibility, it solves a problem by the means of accessibility, and it makes taxpayers, customers, rather than just cattle that you can herd around, can be herded around by public healthcare administrators, and it will make clinicians see more relevant patients earlier, and lots of irrelevant referrals will be filtered away. Some of this is already being handled by artificial intelligence, sorting algorithms. It excites me because it's a new kind of dynamics that has been introduced, and it's democratic without being too socialistic. And so that is my new mega trend on the radar, I believe, that I think it was worth communicating to you about in this exciting new forum of oracles. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, I guess the development of imaging and the distribution of high-tech imaging devices to optometric outlets in many countries is beginning to revolutionize primary care. And I think that was one of the points you were making. I think it's going to be interesting to hear later, because that trend needs to be coupled with machine diagnosis. And when we have distribution of devices, we have changes in primary care, and we have machine diagnosis, that really opens up the optometrists in a big way. But I'm sure Adnan will say something about that later. Questions, please.
Great, thanks. So Michael, wonderful insights. Just to share some UK experience, my cousins north of the border in Scotland have formalised optometrists to do primary care ophthalmology screening, as it's quite a sparse population. They've actually funded them to have OCTs, have put them on the secure NHS net system so they can refer with images. They haven't yet got AI, but they are really a model that the rest of the UK wish to follow, and in some ways the sort of model you're describing. So we're quite encouraged by the way that Scotland has already developed this, and we hope we can kind of go in that same direction. As you said, it's going to be very complementary to the way we manage our patients.
I guess maybe I'd like also to make a comment. It's I think it's a very nice vision, and it's a good use of optometry, particularly since there are such a long waiting list with a lot of people. There are other people, physicians, that could also benefit from this type of installation. When I was still in the Netherlands, we were toying with the idea of placing some cameras in large diabetic practices, you know, with the internist. Since, you know, otherwise we end up very often seeing a lot of patients that have no diabetic retinopathy, and the ones we want to see are the ones that require care. So optometry is a great idea, but maybe we should even expand this idea further to be able to place it elsewhere. And I like one of the points that came through my head, and Adnan, you've answered it in part, is how do we make sure that images can be transferred from optometry, from you know, from an internal medicine practice to us in a secure way? And how do we provide back diagnoses to people that are, you know, have come by an optometrist, and they may or may not be told, listen, I'm going to send this image off to an ophthalmologist. We'll get the diagnosis back and you're set. And so, you know, there are certain other aspects I think we have to also look at.
Especially with the recent changes in protection of individuals' data.
Absolutely, in Europe, yes, for sure, yes.
Adnan?
I think this process has been accelerating with the current pandemic. Patients have been fearful of coming to attend, you know, places like Moorfields is in the centre of London. You have to go through the tube system. And so we've started experimenting with shared care protocols where patients with, you know, diabetic macular edema, which need recurrent injections, you could possibly have an OCT scan at a regional optometric center and then only come up for a defined treatment. So I think the current pandemic will accelerate the sort of ideas that Michael is suggesting out of necessity.
I just would also like to add, some years ago when we developed a small handheld scanning laser ophthalmoscope, we took it into one of the Indian temples in London. And this is a population that really do not like to go to see doctors. And it was extraordinary within the temple to pick up really advanced cases of diabetic retinopathy, which normally wouldn't have been seen. So I think technology is developing now to the level where it's becoming much, much less expensive. And yeah, we have to address other problems, machine diagnosis, confidentiality of records, etc. But Michael, I think you've highlighted something that lots of us are moving towards, and I think it's a great movement, and really to be worked on by all of us.
Michael, may I ask you something? You mentioned that we might move the point of screening into the optician. You know, if you listen to the big companies like Google, Facebook, and those guys, they think a step ahead. They think we know everything about our customers and our population. Why are we not the future healthcare providers? What is your thought on that? So going even beyond what you mentioned, going from an ophthalmologist office to an optician, going beyond and going directly to consumers.
I'm sure that they have plans. They have developed algorithms and service systems, and they're waiting for change in attitude and legislation. But it is absurd that people are still being allowed to administer their own bank accounts when they cannot be allowed to administer their own health records. So it is legally in most countries your own personal property. There's a copy of it that's being managed by the healthcare providers, but it's your legal property. And why shouldn't your bank take care of it, for instance?
Michael, to that end, I've been involved recently. The British government wants a biometric in relation to all financial transactions, whether these on the web or cash machines or whatever. And we've been working on this as a consortium. And clearly the spin-off from this is detecting eye diseases, because the biometric is going to be eye-based. COVID has sort of cut off half the face, so facial analysis is difficult. Nobody wants to leave fingerprints. So it's going to be eye-based. And that is something that's really puzzling us at the moment. If we develop a system which recognizes you as an individual to a level that your banks and credit card companies are happy to deal with it, how do we deal with the problems when there is an aberrant and you're refused access because of changes in your retina or whatever? And it's going to be a big problem, but people are already addressing it, not the least of which are the lawyers.
Well, I see another problem potentially is that if you now use the retina and retinal features as a biometric, If you now exchange an image to get an opinion on some type of retinal pathology, obviously it could recognize the individual. That brings up other issues.
Yep.
But to get back to what you mentioned, biometrics, at least at the level of the iris, have been used in Amsterdam airport for quite a while. The way they've tried to get around it, because if you get eye pathology, you get cataract surgery or something else, it might change things, is that should you have surgery, you have to go back, and every 2 years, the biometrics have to be redone. So there may be ways around that aspect, but I had heard somebody talk about the fact that, yes, you know, they can recognize you on your retinal image, and now you're starting to make me a little bit more concerned.
Well, no, we in the early system, it called up the patient notes. So when the patient sat in front of the slit lamp, bang, you had the patient notes there, because the system was really very, very good.